They're the people who bring the Oscar Pistorius trial onto the television screens of millions of people around the world. We'll go behind the scenes this week on the massive media operation at the High Court in Pretoria. Two experts will tell you how you can make your brand irresistible to consumers. We'll show you a new app that will make you jump for joy, and another big step in the fight against rhino poaching. Also, a pop-up store in Cape Town, catering to a very specific and needy demographic. This is Mags on Media. Well, a very warm welcome to you. We start this week with the Oscar Pistorius murder trial and the media village that has literally sprung up opposite the North Gauteng High Court in Pretoria, reporting this big global story. For anchors and correspondents, it's a day of deadlines, interpretation and harsh lights, as my colleague Yashni Padiachi finds out.
Fueled by caffeine and sugar, the life of a journalist is not as glamorous as it looks. Not since the death of Nelson Mandela in December last year has there been such a media frenzy around just one person. But covering what some have called the trial of the century has its challenges. We spoke to some members of the media to find out exactly what those are.
The weather? The weather's difficult.
We've had to battle the elements more than anything else.
It's almost as though the rain comes out every time you want to do a crossing, and it just starts pouring down. And you know, umbrellas are flying off because sometimes it also gets windy, and I think that's probably the most challenging part logistically behind the scenes.
But it isn't just Mother Nature the media has to contend with.
It's been the social media aspect of it, because it is like being on a roller coaster and trying to keep up to get the information out there on social media.
It's this kind of desperate grasping for new angles from journalists, not just print journalists, from TV journalists as well. We're all looking for new stuff, we're all under pressure from editors.
With radio voices and reporting is to get a quiet background where I can actually do my voice reports from. Having so many stations constantly phoning you, your voice takes a bit of a battering.
Members of the public want to know all the time what is going on. You can't miss a thing.
Although most admit being on the front line has its advantages.
South Africa's beloved son, it's Oscar Pistorius, on trial for murder. And you get to cover it and you get to see him every day.
Most of the journalists are very friendly, very welcoming, and after the trial we'll go and have a few beers or a coffee and discuss what we think is going on, sort of hammer out our theories about the trial. So that stuff I think is really quite nice.
And with more long days to come, the media contingent in Pretoria is going to be needing a lot more caffeine. Yashni Padiachi for Mags on Media.
Well, it really has been a busy time in Pretoria and will continue to be so, I imagine. Let's stay with the media and the law. One of the responsibilities that must accompany the right to a free media is awareness of the law. There's a new book. It's co-authored by well-known media lawyer Dario Milo. It's called A Practical Guide to Media Law. There it is. And it has just been published. Let's get to the lowdown. Dario, welcome, and thank you very much for joining us. A much-needed book, and we'll get to it in just a moment. I want to start with the Oscar trial, if we can. We've seen efforts in the past week or so to ban blogging and Twitter, a decision that was reversed. But the question to you, is the law keeping pace, do you think, with the changing media landscape, the changing media world?
The short answer is no, Jeremy. I think that many other countries have addressed some of the repercussions of digital media by enacting statutes that deal with it expressly. South Africa hasn't done that. So what we do is we apply general common law, centuries-old common law, to existing technologies. And so you have judgments on Facebook here. We have for example, Facebook judgments where judges try to draw analogies and they say, well, look, it's a bit like a big notice board and people put little post-its up with notes. And how would that be regulated? And let's apply that to Facebook. Now, that might yield the correct answer or it might yield the wrong answer. But I think there is time that we have a kind of a more systematic discussion of how our laws need to change, perhaps by statute, to take into account some of these new technologies.
And as far as the trial more broadly is concerned, has the media been acting within the ambit of the law? There is a sense, perhaps, that we may be being a little too cautious.
I think they are acting within the court orders that Judge Masipa has handed down. And perhaps there is an element of extra caution, I think, particularly because this is such a groundbreaking experiment in many ways, to have cameras in the courtroom, subject to the strict conditions that Judge President Mlambo handed down. And so I think the media, probably rightly given the circumstances, are saying, let's not push the envelope as we might otherwise do, because we want to ensure that this is a precedent that is given life in the future.
Let's talk about the book. I was one of those guys that was brought up on Kelsey Stewart's A Newspaper Man's Guide to the Law. It dates me, don't say anything. But the landscape has changed considerably. There really was a need to update this.
Well, absolutely. And we were at first approached by Butterworths, who are the publishers of Kelsey Stewart's Newspaperman's Guide. And they said, please update the book. But of course, update was the completely wrong term to use. It's a great book, great reference guide, but you know, almost nothing in that book now is accurate, because we've had the Constitution. And since the 1993 and the 1996 Constitution, we've had radical reformation of media law. So the book tries to track these developments, in particular by reference to case studies.
Let's pick up on one of those developments, Dario. How much, or in what sense has the understanding, for instance, of right to privacy changed?
I think we've seen cases in the last decade where you've had clashes between celebrities and the media, which weren't cases that were resolved in previous years. Not many cases on privacy, funny enough, even though it's a cause of action that's been around forever. So we've seen, for example, the health minister take on the Sunday Times, and then a leading judgment which says, you know, if it's in the public interest to publish this information, then it can override her right to her medical information, for example. And that was done off the base, that was triggered really by the Constitution, because the Constitution allows the media to say, we have freedom of expression as an entrenched right in Section 16. To the extent that the common law of privacy doesn't allow us to do this, that should be changed, that should be developed in light of the Constitution. I've seen lots of those kind of cases.
One other aspect that you cover in the book is the nature of statutory restrictions on reporting, particularly with things like the National Key Points Act. That still seems to me to be very murky.
Well, absolutely. And of all the chapters in the book, I think that's the one where there's a lot of room for creative lawyering, challenges under the Constitution to a number of those statutory provisions. National Key Points Act is one. Of course, the state says that there's a new Key Points Act coming out. We wait and see what it's about. We've got the Protection of State Information Bill, which we cover in that chapter. No doubt that will face a Constitutional Court challenge in due course. But many other little pieces of statute, you know, in the Criminal Procedure Act, that you can't identify an accused of a sexual offence until they plead, which could be quite way into the process after they're arrested. To me, there's no justification for that. And that's the kind of provision that needs to be challenged.
It's a book that needs to be on the desk, I think, of every journalist and probably every politician in the country. It's called A Practical Guide to Media Law. Dario Milo and Pamela Stein is the co-author. Thank you very much for joining us on Mags on Media. Just ahead on the programme, the advertising battle of the cellular networks and a new app that is going to make you jump for joy. Also, the Rage Committee's latest project to curb the spate of rhino killings in South Africa.
News that moves. eNCA.com.